Real Enigmas and Theories is back again with another video. Oh my goodness. Severance Season 2 Episode 7 is in the books. This season has produced 10 out of 10 episodes each week so far, and we only got 3 left, y'all. We got the exports haul guy looking like Richard Simmons. I know his name's Dr. Meyer, but we calling him Dr. Peabody. We got Milchick in the end looking like Mr. Crockett. Ragabi looking like she straight up knows she's killing Mark at this point. We got Devin threatening somebody who'll take you straight to Little League Aluminum Bat Town without flinching. I mean, Ragabi killed Grainer like she was killing a spider in the garage or some shit. She flooded that boy's severance chip the old school way. Mountain climbing Rickon over here asking Mark if he'd like to drink piss, which was a little bit over the top. The esoteric symbolism and hidden meanings were off the charts this episode. And this was our first flashback episode, and it was another movie experience in my opinion. So good that I had to go live right after that. And I want to say thank you to everybody for watching the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. Let's talk about this masterpiece. So without further ado, pull out your magnifying glasses and let's cook. Now, first off, let me say that I think this episode consists of Mark and Gemma's memories, along with some inside knowledge about what is actually going on the testing floor. Like when we see Evil Hodor and Dr. Peabody talking in the room with the MDR twins. Another way the show's actually showing us what's going on down there is by revealing to us what's going on in some of those rooms. The events that we're seeing happening in these moments are to represent everything going on the testing floor during season 1. We know this because we see all 4 refiner twins and them monitoring scenes that we know to predate the MDR uprising in the waffle party. Like when we see Mark's twin monitoring Miss Casey telling Mark that she was there to observe Helly and keep her from doing anything else to herself. We see Mark by himself in the beginning of some scenes, which would mean that that would be Mark's memory. And then there are times that we see Gemma by herself, and that would be her memories. And the times that we see them sharing together could be either or both. However, there's a hidden possibility here that made the way they wrote, shot, and edited this one of the most slept on beautiful aspects of this episode. It's the one thing that could change everything we think we know about what we saw this episode. And that's if Gemma is lying to Dr. Peabody about being able to remember anything that's going on in those rooms. That would mean that the scenes inside of the rooms are not just information about what's going on the testing level, but Gemma actually remembering what's happening in those rooms. That makes this shit so dope because it wouldn't only affect what we saw, but it would also affect the testing that Dr. Peabody is running on Gemma. So it would fuck him up and it would fuck us up. But I wouldn't be surprised if she is lying to him. Because look at the way she answers the question.
And what happened in the rooms? You remember nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust anybody that was answering me like that. And we'll get into why that's important later. Now, Helly wasn't in this episode at all, but I felt like I was constantly being reminded of her with Gemma. The X-ray radiograph of her head showing her severance chip, squatting down like Helly in the hallway, telling Mark she was nervous, even how Mark asked Gemma, "Who are you?" Drop in the comments and let me know of some of the similarities that you may have picked up on. Give me some that I didn't mention in this video. I didn't mention all of them purposely so you could give me some answers. But one thing that made me think of Helly for sure was Gemma's will to escape. Her busting him over the head with that chair wasn't the first time, because we learned that Gemma tried to break Dr. Peabody's fingers, just like Helly was threatening to sever her own fingers. Yeah, I know his name is Dr. Maurer, but we're calling him Dr. Peabody until further notice, all right? All right. Now, in my last video about Milchick and his paperclips, I made a connection to several things that we see emerging into the picture now. Project or Operation Paperclip with recruited Nazi scientists who conducted research into altered consciousness, hypnotic states, and the effect of extreme conditions on the human mind. And this is what we see happening on the testing level. Dr. Peabody definitely acts like a paperclip scientist. We all had our theories about what was going on down there, but we actually see that each file represents a room that MDR prepares by refining the numbers. Dr. Peabody is the connection to this type of research and the progression of MK Ultra style experiments. Not only does Dr. Peabody mirror the Project Paperclip scientist by his experiments, but also in his devotion to care. Now, all Paperclip scientists were recruited through channels of Masonic relationships and were all a part of some sort of esoteric school of thought, like the Vril Society and the Thule. And these groups were obsessed with the separation of consciousness from the body and mind, and they were also obsessed with twins. The Nazi twin experiments were some of the most horrific abuses of medical science in history, and we see that twins seem to be a reoccurring theme in this show. The Audi and the Innie are twins of sorts, different consciousness with identical bodies. Kier and Dieter were alleged twins, and we also have the MDR twins from the Ortbo and the ones we see on the testing floor. We don't really know what floor they're on, though. To me, it doesn't seem like the twins appear to be the same twins from the Ortbo. And like I said, we don't even know if those twin refiners are on the same floor as Gemma. Now, I've talked about it on this channel before about the fact that we have the macro data refinement team. And in that video, I questioned the audience, could there be a micro data refinement team? And I think these guys might be my answer. I'm just waiting to hear them specifically be called micro data refinement. That's probably coming this season. Each MDR twin watches all refiners, but the main focus is on their respective twin. You have 4 screens on each of their monitor, 1 large screen and 3 smaller screens below. The large screen is to focus on their respective twin, and the other 3 are to watch the other 3 refiners and any interactions that they may have with the focused twin. I noticed something about the Dylan twin. He changes to another twin right here. If you look right here, you could see his face with no beard and his hair is different. And as the camera orbits around, we can see the Helly twin obstruct the view for a second, and then boom, he turns into this guy with a beard. I mean, it's very subtle, but you can totally see that these are 2 different people. Look at this for a minute. I'm gonna play this and show it to you. I'll show you some shots as well. Check it out. This version also checks his watch and acts like he's playing with finger traps. Now, we have seen Dylan show Helly the finger traps, and I'm assuming that this twin is imitating him on the severed floor. So this would mean that this very moment we're seeing on the severed floor, Dylan was showing Helly those finger traps, and that's what he was doing. We've also seen Dylan check his watch before. But what the biggest takeaway from this is that after Milchick shows them the stop motion animation and tells them that there are no more cameras, he was lying because the twins were watching them the whole time. They took away the visible cameras and stuff, and Helena pointed that out when she was masquerading as Helly. But she was trying to reassure them because she knew that on the testing level or wherever those twins are, they were monitoring everything. The Mark twin is also monitoring Gemma on the testing floor for some reason. And the MDR twins are positioned with their backs to each other, very different from MDR. So this orbiting shot represents the time on the severed floor before the waffle party, pretty much giving us the information of what happened during season 1 on the testing floor. This is what was going on while we were watching season 1. We know this because of Irv is there, and this shot of twin Mark is watching them on that screen. So these shots are also showing us what Evil Hodor was doing during season 1. He was down on the testing floor monitoring the Severance barrier. And right behind him, we can see Irv still there. So all of this had to happen before the waffle party. And we know that it did happen before the waffle party because of the scene with Miss Casey there to observe Helly. So this episode is not just giving us a backstory of Mark and Gemma, it's catching us up on what was going on the testing floor since Helly got there. And it also tells us that MDR is preparing the rooms for the subjects to enter, and it gives us clues that there may be others down there with Gemma. I think the biggest clue to that is that Gemma had those cards and O&D is still printing those cards. So they might have more recruits out there to come to that testing floor. I'm betting that you had to fit a certain criteria in order to be selected for this type of severance. Now, I wonder why Gemma apologizes to Mark in the fertility clinic right here.
I love you too. I'm sorry.
The apology didn't seem like it was something for what she did. It seemed like it was an apology for something she was about to do. Listen to the music that drops as she starts filling out that form. This scene started with her going through the door, and then it ends with her sitting in the living space of her domicile. I believe this was one of her memories, and this shot right here morphs into her sitting there thinking about what she has done that ends herself up in this situation, a situation that she's no doubt getting tired of. Now, look at this scene right here. It's at this point in the episode 7 where we have caught up to the events of season 2, episode 1. Check this out. This contraption that we see here is a more advanced version of what Ragabi used to monitor Mark's brainwave activity. At the end of episode 1, we saw this twin screen monitoring this conversation between Gemma and Dr. Peabody. And I said this in my episode 1 breakdown that this was not Mark's screen. I also thought that it would probably be a screen that was actually on the testing floor, and it looks like I was right. Now, how do we know that this is the same moment from episode 1 of season 2? We can tell because everything in these boxes is the same as these boxes in this image. And this is the image from episode 1 at the very end of the episode when it shows Gemma's face. So this twin screen is what we were seeing at the end of episode 1. This shot right here kind of also mirrors Helly's severance procedure in season 1. It's showing a radiograph of her head with the severance chip inside, just like Helly. Now, I'm no dentist, but I definitely looked at a couple lateral skull radiographs, and it seems that wherever you see the bright white spots is where some sort of filling or hardware may have been implanted. I mean, look at the severance chip. It shows up white, and it looks like something maybe have been implanted into her teeth. Now, my theory is that the testing floor is preparing people to go out into the real world and complete missions. And this outfit looks like she's been training. And we've now seen her with the cards from O&D. And this would imply there being more people having sets of these cards and going through the same initiation process as Gemma did. I believe that this was voluntary, and this also connects Gemma yet again to Bert. He worked in O&D where the cards came from, and judging by the time he worked there and the time that she got those cards, I'm sure they were made during his tenure as the department head of O&D. Now, back to the teeth real quick. I think that they're being trained to go out on these missions, and I know this is real tinfoil, but I think that they may have put explosives in her teeth so that if she is sent to go out and do something, they can detonate and destroy the evidence of the severance chip. Now, back to all these Bert connections. When we first heard the story of MDR having pouches with larvae, it was from Bert. And Miss Casey held her wellness sessions with the mammalians, and the mammalians also knew about the pouches and the larvae, and that story came from Bert. We don't know who told them, but I'm sure if Bert was there for that long, then he was at least there when that story got started, or he probably could have been the one to actually start that story. And something that always puzzled me is why Miss Casey would go tell Irv that Bert was in the conference room. And not to mention, the first time that we saw Bert, he was coming from the wellness session with Miss Casey. And we do hear Dylan say that he met Bert before, but we met Bert coming from the wellness center when he met Irv. So there's Irv and Bert once again connected to Miss Casey. So it's peculiar that we see Gemma years ago with cards made by Bert's team. And I've mentioned the Gemma and Bert and Irv connections before, and they just keep showing up. By the way, we did our first members only live stream today where we listened to Rick and Hale's audiobook. We had a lot of fun in there. It's still a members only video. If you're a member, you can go check it out. We left a lot of notes in the actual chat section, and then we had a discussion about it afterwards. So join the channel membership so you can have access to all the members only content and our custom channel emojis. Also, if you're liking this video, tap that screen for me a few times and do all that dope YouTube stuff. It helps the channel grow. And be sure to share this with somebody who you think they may like it. Thank you in advance. Now, I've stated on this channel before that I believe the export hall guy could be the therapist with the funny mustache that Devin asked Mark about in season 1. That's gotta be a Chekhov's gun situation right there. We do know now that that's Dr. Peabody, but I also think that he was Bert's Lumon partner that Field spoke about. And if that's true, this guy is just one connection to Bert all over again. And if he's a connection to Bert, it makes me question why Milchick went through the trouble of pulling the OTC just to get one of those cards back that Dylan took. This right there is the event that started the whole MDR uprising. Because if that doesn't happen, our refiners never find out that they can even be woken up on the outside. Milchick revealing this to Dylan and then leaving Ricken's book in the conference room are the two things that derailed and delayed Lumon's plans for sure. The book being brought in by Cobell and left by Milchick in the conference room makes for a real Trojan horse. And Cobell even tells Milchick to go look in it for any type of coded language. That's how he started reading it in the first place, which is crazy because she's the one who brought that shit in there in the first place. And then she told Milchick to read it. The cards connecting to Bert also make me question why Gemma lies about the significance of the cards. She played that off terribly, and Mark caught on to it. And then he asked her why a college-level Russian literature professor would be wasting time with something like this that came in the mail. And she got real triggered by that and called him an asshole. And then she even lies about the context of the cards by claiming it was the same guy fighting himself, like the death of ego. And we'll talk about that later too. But these cards are clearly depicting a combat moves and combat techniques. And one of them just has a man with a dog on it. So what's her explanation for that card? Something was definitely fishy there. She goes on to say that she gotten on the list to receive these cards at that fertility clinic. And like I said, again, peep how that music drops. I don't think Gemma was originally kept against her will. Because why would he lie to her about Mark moving on and having a daughter with somebody else if he was holding her against her will? You would just be holding her against her will. She'd be a prisoner. She'd be asking to go home and you'd be like, no. But if you're telling her that Mark moved on because she's saying she wants to see Mark again, that would mean that you're trying to discourage her or help her change her mind from leaving. And that would imply that at some point she was on board with this shit. And like I said, peep how that music drops. And speaking of drops, peep how the nurse has to give a drop of blood for Gemma to be able to enter one of those rooms. And if she went to 6 rooms, then that lady had to get poked 6 times in the finger. Not only that, but Gemma and Mark also meet at a blood donation center. And we all know that blood donation is actually bloodletting ritual. Now, there's one thing I noticed about the woman helping Gemma at the blood drive. She looks like the Helly MDR twin. I'm not saying it's her, but it looks like her. Now, I'm not going to lie. I knew that we were going to get a flashback with Mark and Gemma's, a little bit of backstory on them. But I definitely didn't expect it to start off at a blood drive. That was totally unexpected for me. Them meeting there doesn't seem to be by chance. And it could be how these two were selected by Lumon for their future plans. Now, the history behind blood donation oddly aligns with what we see going on in Lumon. In the 1600s, physicians experimented with transfusing blood from animals into humans, like lamb or calves or goats. And they didn't only do this to cure diseases, they actually used to do this to change the person's personality. Go look it up. Imagine your mom taking you to the doctor and he prescribed you goat blood transfusion. Now it's crazy because most doctors had no knowledge of blood types until the 1900s. A guy named Carl Landsteiner cracked the code. But before that, many of those attempts led to severe reactions and even death. And before modern regulations, prisoners, the poor people, and the vulnerable groups were sometimes coerced into bloodletting or donating blood so that they could earn money for their families. Now, this show referencing Project Paperclip reminds me of the Nazi regime's obsession with racial purity, which extended to the medical and genetic research that involved bloodletting. They even created propaganda that portrayed Aryan blood as superior. They even had state-sponsored efforts to document and control who was deemed racially pure. Blood tests to confirm Aryan lineage were actually performed all the way back then. Then, early 20th century eugenics in the United States focused more on hereditary traits than blood tests, but the rhetoric was often used as good blood versus bad blood. And they used those terms to justify forced sterilizations on those who they deemed unfit. Even before World War II, American eugenics programs promoted the ideal of some bloodlines being superior to others. And this movement is what influenced the Nazi racial policies that led to forced sterilization of thousands of Americans deemed unfit to reproduce. Now check out this connection right here. The American Eugenics Society, or the AES, and the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory collected bloodline data to determine desirable traits. Yeah, I know y'all caught that. Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. Go look that up. Now, after this happened, this led to the Tuskegee syphilis study. And that was a 40-year-long government experiment in which Black men with syphilis were studied, but never treated. This was even after penicillin was discovered, and they were purposely infected with syphilis. And a lot of these guys were quarantined and made to look at like nude magazines and stuff, and sat in this quarantine for months before they were let out into their communities to pass the syphilis around. Blood was drawn from these participants regularly, but they were never told of their true medical status. Now, the Tuskegee syphilis study was conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service, or the PHS, which later became what we now know as the CDC, or the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, beyond official health records, some believe that large blood donation organizations or genealogical DNA testing companies might share their donor data information with government agencies, and documents occasionally surface claiming certain donors to be flagged for special attention. And this sounds just like what we see going on in Lumon. Perhaps Mark and Gemma were flagged and observed. Now, Lumon's core mission in Severance isn't just about severed control. It could also involve identifying or engineering specific genetic or biological traits. Sounds a lot like what we see happening in our real world. Rare blood types are tracked by hospitals and military agencies. Stem cells and young blood are actively sought by biotech billionaires. The U.S. government has a history of unethical blood-based experiments. Private DNA database contain genetic and blood information on millions of people. Now, the fact that Mark and Gemma both showed up to donate blood might mean that they have preferred or a flagged trait in their blood. I mean, we do see an Egan who is arranging secret Ortbos just to mate with Mark. And I don't think it's just because she saw her innie kissing him by the elevator door. Mark is supposed to be somebody who is refining a file that is supposed to be a monumental moment in human history. And Helly wants to be a part of that, or Helena wants to be a part of that. What about Mark has made him so important to this Cold Harbor situation? Gemma has gone to every room except for Cold Harbor. And if she's gone into every room, then she's gone through rooms that other refiners have prepared. So why is it that he has to be the one to finish this particular file? Why couldn't they just get somebody else? Why not have Dylan do it? He's good. Moreover, if Mark is refining the last room, then what are the other refiners doing? Yo, that Cold Spring Harbor connection is fire. But let me point this out real quick. I love how this episode just reaches back to other symbolism that I've pointed out in other episodes. In this episode, we see the woe meter, and we also see Gemma talking about the death of ego. Now, back in the Woes Hollow episode, we saw the name Egan on the screen in Irv's dream. Now, we also saw the word egg on there a whole lot too. We even saw the word eggnog, but the word ego was all over the screen as well, EGO. And I'm taking this as another Bert and Irv connection to Gemma, being that Bert was also in that dream. And now Gemma is making a reference to ego. Yo, shout out to Debbie Ebby Bebby for pointing out the ego references episodes ago. So the egg was also on the screen heavy along with the name Onan. Now, Onan is one of Judah's sons in the Bible who was to marry his brother Er's widow and father a child to keep the family lineage going. Now, Onan was also referenced in the Woes Hollow episode by being referenced in the story of Dieter because he didn't want to father a child with his brother's widow, but he did marsh the mellows with her. However, before ejaculating, he pulls out and spills his seed on the ground, just like Dieter did in the fourth appendix. Now here's where it gets trippy. Er's widow was named Tamar, whose story resembles that of Helena's. Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute and marshes mellows with her late husband's father, Judah, and Judah fathers a child with her. Now, what in the hell was Judah doing with a prostitute in the first place? But this story mirrors Helena, because that's what she did to Mark. And all of this egg and fertility symbolism is coming full circle with showing us the complications that Gemma was having with pregnancy. And the name Boozman Fertility Clinic literally translating into boogeyman doesn't make this connection any more settling. It makes me believe that Gemma wasn't having any complications at all. Perhaps Lumon is behind Gemma's miscarriage and Mark was the intended target the whole time. They knew something was in his blood. Man, there's so much I want to talk about in this video. I mean, yo, it's crazy. This one was crazy. This episode was crazy. But there you have it. You got some theories. You got a little bit of symbolism, some history with some heavy hidden meaning up in there. So if you vibing with this, please show some love and do all that dope YouTube stuff by tapping that screen a few times for me, by liking, sharing, and dropping down in the comments to get the conversation started. And if you're not subscribed, hopefully this will be the video to make you do it. And I want to give a shout out to all my members and subscribers. I thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. It means the world to me. Anyway, just a little something to think about while we wait on the next episode. That's all for my video today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.